requests before we begin. One request is to please be kind and gentle with yourself. I'm hoping to share some information that might be relatively new for you. And sometimes when we hear new information as a parent, we have some regret. And sometimes when we have regret, we have shame and criticize ourselves for not knowing this information earlier. And when that happens, I just encourage you to notice if there's a little voice that kind of acts out at you that says, you're bad, or you're such a bad parent for not knowing this sooner, or not educating my partner on this or something. And if that voice comes up inside your own mind, I just invite you to say to it, please be kind. I'm learning and growing. So we can set limits on those voices with kindness. I call it a loving limit. And how we discipline ourselves and our own minds and hearts translates to how we discipline our children. So it's helpful to start with ourselves. So just see if you might be willing to honor that request, to say to yourself, please be kind, I'm learning and growing, when you start hearing that verbal attack, if it comes up. My second request is to please consider what I have to say tonight as a language. This is just one way of parenting. There's many languages. There's many ways. So I hope you'll use a good filter tonight. I hope there will be some things that I say that are things you already know, that just kind of pops it into foreground in your mind. Some things that I say are really new, perhaps, and you're kind of like mulling it over and considering it, and maybe have a question for me at the end. Put these blank note cards out front so that you can write your name and any questions you have. And you can always contact me afterwards. And I also hope that there's some things that just don't work for you at all. I hope I say something and you're like, that's not going to work for me, that's not going to work for my kid. And just let that go. So my request there is to just let go of whatever doesn't work for you instead of struggling with it. And my third request is I have so much information I want to share with you. I probably won't be able to fit it all in. So it would help me if you could hold on to your questions until the end. If you have a burning question, you can raise your hand, and Erin, who works for me and our team of clinicians at Mindful Child and Family Therapy, she's one of our associates, she'll write that question on the paper over here, and we'll make sure to address it at the end. So tonight we're going to address these four main questions. What is emotional intelligence? How does it benefit our kids? Why do we feel emotions anyway? What's the point of them? And what gets in the way of feeling our feelings and thus promoting emotional intelligence? I also want to say that we're going to talk about how to promote emotional intelligence on the 22nd. So this is part one of a two-part series, and that talk will happen at Walter Hayes. So this is all kind of the why emotional intelligence is important and why it's important to feel feelings. And on the 22nd, we're going to talk about the how. I really deeply believe that parents will be much more motivated to do the how once they're deeply rooted and invested in the why. So that's why I take a whole night to talk about the why. So what is emotional intelligence? Just take a moment to think about it in your own mind. What is it? What do you think it is? Social emotional learning specialists tend to agree that it has three main components. That it's the ability to identify, understand, and regulate emotion. Emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, understand, and regulate emotion. So let's just break that into those three parts, and that will be the framework for the talk for tonight and on the 22nd as well. Beginning with emotional identification. Emotional identification is the ability to even recognize that we're having emotional experiences at all, which sometimes is quite challenging. It's also the ability to discern between various emotions and emotional states, both in ourselves and in others. There's a lot to understand about emotions, and I'll try to be brief and just address a few things to understand that I think are helpful. I like to think about emotions as waves, and that could be because I'm a surfer and I love being in the ocean. So emotions tend to build, peak, and then subside, just like a wave. Sometimes emotions can get stuck in our bodies, They can travel like waves travel in the ocean for miles and miles and miles, and days and days and days. And sometimes emotions are unpleasant, and when they're unpleasant, we brace against those feelings, and they build up. And when emotions build up, we tend to see lots of different things happening. One thing that can happen is that that energy can kind of turn inward and affect the body. We'll talk about that in the talk today. It can impact the body negatively, kind of like a buildup of urine or a buildup of constipation. When we build up emotional residue, it can have an impact on our health. Another thing that can happen is that we or our children, if we have a lot of emotional buildup, can start acting out. So it's important for us to understand how emotions and behavior interact. That if there's a lot of emotional constipation, then we might see children acting out. What does that look like, acting out? So maybe they will not be able to focus at school and listen to their teachers as well. Maybe they will be less cooperative with us. Maybe they will be whining all the time, dropping out little bits of emotion in a superficial way all the time. And it's helpful to see that as a signal for help. A signal for help that they need some help processing their feelings. And I also want to say that during the talk today, I'm going to be talking about the difference between feeling our feelings, and when I'm talking about processing feelings or feeling feelings, I'm going to have my hands move across the side like this. And understanding, in terms of emotional understanding, that that's very different than acting out from our feelings. So just take a moment to let that sink in, the difference between feeling feelings and processing them in safe and healthy ways, and acting out from our feelings, or acting out from our feelings. So for instance, just to make that a little bit more tangible, let's say I had a hard day at work and I'm feeling a little angry by something that happened at work. It's perfectly fine for me to feel angry. I'm a human being and I feel anger too. If I come home and I'm looking for a healthy way to express that anger, something I might do is turn on some music, maybe some African drum beats, and just dance out my anger. Or maybe I have a punching bag in the garage and I just take some punches at it and just make some sound and some breath to get rid of that anger. Or maybe I go for a run and I put on some tunes and I bring up the thing that was a little frustrating to bring it to the foreground as I'm moving my body to physically process my anger. So those are all safe and healthy ways to process anger. If I'm acting out from my anger, I might come home and see that the milk wasn't bought or the shoes aren't where they're supposed to be, and I might attack my husband with a U-bomb. You never blah, blah, blah. Or I might attack my child. You always leave the shoes where they're not supposed to be. So that would be acting out from my anger, because I'm throwing a U-bomb at someone I love. And I've been probably not throwing U-bombs at anyone at work or at anyone at school. But if I'm acting out, I'd be throwing a U-bomb at someone I love. So do you feel the difference between feeling my feeling of anger in a healthy way and acting out from it? Is that making sense? Okay, thank you. That's helpful to understand the difference. It's also helpful to understand that feelings are meant to be felt. Thoughts are meant to be thought. Sensations are meant to be sensed. And feelings are meant to be felt. And then this third part of emotional intelligence is emotional regulation. So let's think about emotional regulation, because regulation is kind of a complex topic. It's a complex idea, complex concept. So some things that need to be regulated: heartbeat, temperature, speed. We need to regulate our speed in the car. So when we think about regulating speed, we need two main things. What do we need? I'll ask you as the audience. What do we need to regulate speed? Rules. Mm-hmm.
Enforcement.
Okay, rules enforcement. Stopped. Brakes, yes, that's what I'm thinking about. Brakes and acceleration, gas. Yes, brakes and acceleration. Yeah, and maybe it doesn't come from gas anymore. It could come from energy. So brakes and acceleration. So when we think about the emotional life, it's helpful to understand that emotional regulation is not just about stopping the feelings. And I think this is often misunderstood. So it's something I'll drill home tonight and on the 22nd. I'll talk about this until you're bored with me. So I think it's so important, this misconception that managing feelings is stopping them. It's a real disservice. So we do need breaks. We do need to be able to learn to contain our feelings. We need to be able to hold our feelings in when it's inappropriate to release them in strong ways. And we also need to learn how to process our feelings in safe and healthy ways so it doesn't hurt our body or someone we love. Acting in or acting out. One of the best ways to make sure that our feelings don't act in or act out is to learn how to safely process our feelings in safe, healthy ways, to seek out safe, healthy environments to do that. And that's one of my deepest wishes, that we all might find safe, healthy environments to process our feelings more easily. So emotional regulation is about containing and releasing feelings. The brakes and the acceleration. Another metaphor for regulation is a bladder. So when babies are born, they're not able to contain their urine, and they're not able to contain their feelings very well either. Over time, they learn how to contain their bladder, and over time, with our guidance and loving support, they'll learn how to contain their feelings. And it's helpful if we have that vision for them, because sometimes we get a little worried, don't we, as parents, because we see that they're not containing their feelings very much. And we get worried that they're going to grow up and be big adults that look like little kids emotionally. And unfortunately, that fear and worry about them often will cause us to get angry at them when they're not containing their feelings well. And that's when we tend to act out at them. We get scared, and the close cousin to fear and anxiety is anger. We get scared and we get angry, and we lash out. So it's helpful for us to hold the possibility that our children will learn to manage their feelings well, that they will learn how to contain their feelings. And one of the ways that you can help them to contain their feelings more easily is by helping to give them safe places to release their feelings in the safety of your home, hopefully, so that they can contain more easily at school. The teacher has, I don't know, in your school, in my school they have 25 kids to manage. So, you have maybe 4 kids, or 3 kids, or 2 kids, or 1. So it's just helpful to create a safe home environment to help them process their feelings at home so they can contain more easily at school. It's also helpful to know that regulation happens in relationship. So Dan Siegel is an interpersonal neurobiologist. Some of you are nodding your heads. He has really wonderful work over the past decade or more in the field of interpersonal neurobiology. So he studies and has shown that our brains and relationships interact to shape the developing mind. That the brain and relationships interact to shape the developing mind. He's shown that when we, as the caregiver, the attachment figure, can stay regulated ourselves when our children are overwhelmed with emotion, it actually grows their brains in a way that will help them regulate themselves better later on. And this is something I'm going to say in lots of different ways so it can sink in better. I'm going to keep repeating this part. When we, as the parent, can stay calm and regulated in the midst of our child's overwhelm, it actually helps our children to grow the regulatory neural circuitry that will help them regulate themselves later on in life. Maybe not next week, But if we can do that again and again and again, it will eventually help them grow their brains in a way that will help them regulate their emotions better later in life. So it's just one of the reasons why it's helpful not to only always give our children timeouts when they're emotional and angry and upset. Instead of always sending them away, it's helpful to understand that one of the best ways to help them learn emotional regulation is by being emotionally regulated ourselves and staying close to them when they're upset. Does that make sense? Okay. I say it in lots of different ways. You're going to get bored of me talking about this. So Dan Siegel says that normal human development relies on the cultivation of relationships with others to form and nurture the self-regulatory circuits that enable emotion to enrich rather than enslave our lives. So, how does EI, or emotional intelligence, benefit our kids? Luckily, there's been lots of research on this, so this is over 20 years of research, which shows that emotional intelligence improves academic performance, physical health, the ability to build lasting, meaningful relationships, job performance, career advancement, and lifelong success. Now, what parent wouldn't want that? Yeah. In terms of academic performance, I'm just going to make a little brain model with my hand, a little hand model of the brain, and this is from Dan Siegel's work. So if I plot my brain out to the side, and I use my hand as a model, my knuckles here, my 4 fingers, represent the prefrontal cortex, or the higher order thinking brain, and if I open my fingers up, the nail bed of my thumb represents the limbic brain, which is thought to be the area of the emotional life, the amygdala, and other parts of the brain that are involved with feeling our feelings. So what tends to happen if a child has a backlog of emotional debris that's building up inside, that they're not able to feel more fully and deeply to process it and let it go, is it draws energy and blood flow from the higher order thinking brain into the limbic brain, into the emotional brain, and that's taking energy and resources away from their ability to focus and think and take in new information and learn. It sucks the energy away from those regions of the brain. So if we can coach our children in feeling their feelings more fully and can empty out some of that emotional debris, they'll be freed to learn and focus better and feel more relaxed and settled in their bodies. It could help with hyperactivity, could help with ADD. So something else to know is that Dan Goleman has written a book called Emotional Intelligence, and he says that the single most important factor in job performance and advancement is emotional intelligence. And TalentSmart tested emotional intelligence alongside 33 other important workplace skills and found that emotional intelligence is the strongest predictor of performance, explaining a full 58% of success in all types of jobs. Studies also show that emotional intelligence reduces failed relationships, interpersonal violence, substance abuse, and unhappiness, or chronic unhappiness. So in terms of violence, it's really helpful to know, and I was kind of shocked as I was starting to learn this as a counselor, that people who have problems managing anger, people with anger management problems, often don't even realize they're angry. Sitting in the room with them after they've just verbally attacked their spouse, they don't say, yeah, I'm really angry. They say, I'm not angry. If she just wouldn't say that thing, then it'd be fine. So it's really helpful to understand that being able to identify, I'm having a strong emotional experience, to understand the signals that go along with anger, will enable me to manage my anger well. So emotional intelligence is incredibly important for learning to manage anger and prevent interpersonal violence, even emotional violence. And in terms of substance abuse, it's also helpful to understand that the treatment for alcoholism, or one of them, is AA. And it was fascinating for me to learn this too, that in AA, one of the main focuses is to help people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol or overeating, to help them learn how to cope with their feelings. It's a huge focus of the treatment, is getting them back in touch with their feelings, to help them redevelop that bridge to their heart that's been severed. So what happens? We have a hard day at work, we come home, and have a glass of wine or a beer. We have a hard day at school and we smoke some pot. We have someone break up with us and we eat a pint of ice cream. Or our kid is crying and we want them to stop, so we give them a cookie. So really looking at the use of substances to curb our feelings is so helpful. To know that instead of denying our feeling that's coming like a wave, it's going to peak and I maybe don't want to feel it, so I'm going to stop it. It's fine to stop it, and sometimes we need to. But may we learn how to process our feelings and feel our feelings and grow in that capacity to do what you all did at the beginning of the talk today, and turn towards yourself with kindness and care and simply feel what's there. Just as it is, without needing to change it or stop it or fix it. And if we can help our children do this, we might just help prevent a substance abuse issue. As they see us modeling the capacity to be with them as they feel a big feeling, they'll learn that. If we can show them how, it will be so much easier for them. It's not about stopping them from feeling their feelings. It's about showing them the power of being with a feeling and simply moving it through. That's possible, and that we believe in their capacity to feel their big feelings. That it won't kill them. That it won't kill us. That it won't drive us crazy. That we can be relaxed next to them as they feel. That we won't send them away into isolation. That we won't yell at them for feeling feelings. That we could possibly be right there with them as they feel it. So, I'd love to invite you to consider this question: why is it important to feel our emotions? And what I'd like to do is to have you turn towards someone next to you and consider that question together. Why do you think it's important to feel feelings? So just take a few moments, and each of you can give a shot at it. Answering this question. Thank you for that consideration and intellectual exercise. So yeah, why have emotions survive the evolutionary process? Especially the big, strong, unpleasant feelings. Like, wouldn't it be nice just to get rid of them? Why are they still here after all of these years? So one main reason is because emotions communicate a lot of information very, very quickly. So what I'd like you to do, if you're willing, is to use your hands to follow my hands with your own body. So watch, and then you can do it with me. Guess, what is that about? What am I demonstrating there? Say it again. Listening, yep. As a group, what are those things? Senses, yeah. So nonverbal communication. Those are all different ways we share nonverbal communication with each other, which is imbued with emotion. So let's do it again, and I'll put words to it. Facial expressions. Volume. Tone of voice. Gesticulation, arm movements. Body posture. These are all different ways we communicate information through our emotions very quickly. So I'm going to just kind of drive this home a little bit. I'm going to do some extreme movements so you can see the difference using 3 words, the same 3 words, imbued with different emotion. Ready? I love you. 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 You guys like that? Yeah? So I communicated a lot of information pretty quickly. Nonverbal communication. Another reason emotions are very important is because they connect us. So think about the person who you would call when a pet dies, or you lose your job, or your partner loses their job, or you get a raise, or your partner gets a raise. Who would you share those emotional moments with? Someone you feel close to. Probably not someone you feel very far away from. That's because when we feel felt by someone, it bonds us. And if our children can feel felt by us, it will connect us. And that connection is called a protective factor, in fact, a super protective factor, protecting them from lots of different ailments, including substance abuse and teen pregnancy and suicide. Our connection with our children matter, and anything we can do to invest in it will help, including being present for them as they feel big feelings, and not always only sending them away. It's perfectly fine if you really enjoy or value the time out in your household, no problem. But maybe thinking about expanding that toolbox to include moments of staying connected to your child as they feel big feelings too, to invest in that connection. So one metaphor for this is thinking about how a piano can be in the same room as a guitar, so 2 totally different instruments. And if you hit the E string, or E key, in the piano, what will happen? The E string on the guitar will start to vibrate. So it's something called sympathetic resonance. And in our brains, we call that empathic resonance. When our child is feeling an emotion and we're attached to them and close to them, we care so deeply about it, we'll feel that emotion too. It connects us. Think about some of the people who get paid the most in this world on earth. Like multi-millions, like hundreds of millions of dollars. Who gets paid hundreds of millions of dollars without owning their own business? Raise your hand. What do you think? Yeah.
People who figure out how to connect others.
Yes. Great, yes. People who figure out how to connect others. Who are some people who do that really well?
Entertainers or sports figures.
Yes, entertainers and sports figures. That's what I was thinking too. So actors and actresses, they make us feel something. If they're not good actors and actresses, they won't get paid millions and millions of dollars. But the ones who really do make us feel something, dramas make us cry all together at the same time in the movie theater, and that's why we sometimes like to watch it at home. Comedies make us laugh. Horror movies make us terrified. They make us feel something, and they get paid a lot of money for that. They make us feel connected. And then, yes, sports people, athletes. My husband is a pretty even-keeled guy. You put him in front of a football game with one of his favorite teams, and he's like this.
Yes! Oh man, no!
The most emotional I ever see him is when he watches a game. So I like to think about the football stadium like a really helpful container of feelings. Lots of people at the same time feeling the same thing when there's a touchdown. I mean, I look funny right now doing that because I'm the only one doing it. But here, everyone's doing it, so it's totally normalized. It gives all of us, especially those who identify as male, an outlet for feeling really big feelings. Heights and depths in a really extreme way. And it's all okay. One of the few places where it's all okay for us to feel that extreme of an emotion. I think that's my own personal theory. I think that's one of the reasons, the hidden, unconscious reasons, why people drive for hours and hours and hours to sit in the freezing cold, sometimes in snow, to watch a game that they could watch a lot more easily on the TV. It's this connection, this feeling like I'm not alone, and feeling this intense joy and feeling this intense frustration. So let's support our kids and our partners in getting involved in sports. It's a great way. It's a great outlet. It's a really healthy outlet for the expression of feelings, for the processing of feelings. Another main reason that emotions are so important is that they guide our behavior. A lot of people think, like, just use your head to make the decision, don't use your heart. And that's actually quite misguided. Advice. And we know this in part because Antonio Damasio is a doctor who studied a particular kind of brain injury. The brain injury that connects, that is severed. There's a separation between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic brain. So that circuit that connects the two, or Dan Siegel says the staircase that connects the two, the neural fibers that connect the two are severed. Intact prefrontal cortex, intact higher order thinking brain, intact emotional brain, but not an ability to draw from the emotional world and the emotionally imbued memories to make a decision. And it turns out that all of the people he looked at, their decision-making process was incredibly flawed. They had the hardest time making decisions, all of them. So it turns out that our emotions streamline the decision-making process. Dan Goleman says, our deepest feelings, our passions and longings are essential guides. And Rumi, in the 1400s, 500 years ago, writes, 600 years ago, writes, this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness. They come as unexpected visitors. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, for for each has been sent as a guide from the beyond. Each has been sent as a guide. Our feelings are guides. May we welcome them. May we host them. May we help them through the doorway so they can eventually leave. They'll eventually go home. We can trust them. We just need to welcome them in first so they don't stay at the door pounding, getting louder, calling out for our attention. May we welcome them in. Emotions also help us release bodily tension and stress. Well, there are two main ways that our bodies help us release tension and stress through our emotional lives. Can you guess? Some guesses. All answers are welcome. Some guesses. And you might have thought of something I haven't thought of. So, two main ways that the body releases tension and stress through emotion. Crying, yes, and laughing, yay. Yeah, so watch my body. I'm going to have you study my body and compare these two, laughter and crying. I'm going to do the best I can. I might not get paid $1 million or something, but I'll do the best I can. And look for similarities and differences. Track that. You guys ready? Over here is crying. Similarities. Oh, did you have one? You have an idea? What did she say?
Both made similar sounds?
Yes, both of them made lots of sound, and they were similar. So one of the ways that they were similar is that they were ha 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 ha. So the diaphragm is tensing and releasing very quickly. Ha 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 ha. Kind of like those of you who practice yoga, Kapalabhati. Ha 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 ha. What's happening is all of these muscles in the abdomen are tensing and releasing, shedding tension. Shedding tension. Lots of muscular engagement very quickly. Tensing, releasing, tensing, releasing, tensing, releasing. Okay, how else are they similar? Yeah. Yes. Great. Thanks, kids. I'm really glad that you guys are answering the questions. So yeah, both of them use my arms and my hands. For when I'm crying, I was holding myself. When I'm laughing, I'm kind of moving and like touching myself and also holding my belly sometimes. It's so overwhelming to laugh that hard and cry that hard. I almost have to physically contain myself so I don't leave my body. It's so hard or so joyous. I need some physical containment, so moving my arms and hands. Great. How were they different? Yeah.
One were fully down kind of within yourself, and the other was very outward.
Yes.
Open.
Yes. Yeah. So crying tends to have us curl in, especially if we're crying for something sad. Maybe if we were watching a wedding and we were moved to tears of joy, we might be a little more upright. It's more of an open position. And laughter, I was very open. I was kind of moving inward slightly a little bit too. There was a lot of movement in both of them. That's another way we release stress, was that overall movement of our whole body. But yeah, the laughter was more open. Anything else before I go on that you saw? Yeah, different facial expressions, exactly. Yeah. One was like a prune face, and one was more of an open face with the laughter. Yeah, a lion face. Great. Let's see. Yeah, so I found this this really fascinating. This is some research by Robert Sapolsky. He's a Harvard graduate, a neuroscientist, and a biologist at Stanford. And he got really curious about animals in the wild. He was thinking, you know, these animals in the wild, they are getting threatened. Their lives are getting threatened daily. Their lives are getting threatened daily, but they're not developing stress-related conditions, and we are. Our lives aren't getting threatened daily. We have stressors, but they're not like life or death. So what's going on here? Why are these animals in the wild getting stressed that intensely and not developing stress-related conditions? The answer that he and other trauma therapists have discovered through their research: they shake and tremble, or they run. Their bodies are releasing a lot of tension through physical movement or shaking and trembling. And the shaking and trembling could be similar to our crying and laughing. Tensing and releasing, tensing and releasing, tensing and releasing. When babies come into the world in their animal bodies, what's one of the first things they do? Cry. Yes, they cry. Why? They can't even regulate their breathing very well yet. They can hardly regulate their heart rate very well. They need another mammal to regulate their heart rates well and their breathing well. And they don't even cry until how many weeks, do you think? Laugh. They don't even kind of laugh until how many weeks? Anyone want to make a guess? 6 weeks, until about 6 weeks. Why is laughter not there at birth, but crying is? Why is crying there at birth? It helps to shed the tension and stress from a very stressful process of being born into this world. It's a stressful process. Anyone who's ever given birth knows. It's a stressful process. It's not just stressful for us, it's stressful for the little one too. Anyone who's ever witnessed a birth, witnessed their partner giving birth, it's a stressful process. How wonderful that they can cry and shed that tension right away. And we celebrate that first cry, don't we? It's a sign of health, isn't it? Ah, they're crying. Maybe for some of us, it's the one and only time we celebrate their cry. What if we could get some of that curiosity back? And that awe? And like that amazement and trust in them and their bodies, wisdom? That's it, babe. Keep going. I'm right here. Tell me all about it. To look at them with that awe and confidence in them as they're having a big emotional moment and trusting their body's wisdom, trusting that they're shedding tension and stress in one of the most efficient ways, by crying. Discharging energy, discharging activated energy that could hurt their bodies if they contain it and stuff it in there too much, that could come out as attack on others through their acting out. If we only teach them how to stuff and leave us and not have us near them as a resource to help them process these big, unpleasant, uncomfortable feelings. I'm a therapist. I get paid a lot of money to help people process their feelings. Lots of adults come to me to help process their feelings and get back in touch with their feelings. If adults need support with this, our little ones need it too. And you, I want to inspire you. You can become that person for them. And some of you are that person already. So much better for you to be that person than the teacher at school, or the theater coach, or the football coach, or the gang member. So helpful for you to be the one that they come to with their biggest, hardest feelings. We can do this. Yes, we can. We can do this. Dr. Judith Orliff she wrote a book called Emotional Freedom, and she writes, typically after crying, our breathing and heart rate decrease, and we enter into a calmer biological and emotional state. It's like exercising. It's like helping our kids run a marathon. If we can support them through a really good, deep, hard cry, it's like coaching them through a marathon. You can do this. You got this. Keep going. Instead of only stop. William Fry is a biochemist from Stanford, and I love this research. So he got really curious about tears. And he found that there are two different types of tears. There's emotional tears that we release when we're really extremely happy, ecstatic states of love and joy, when we're watching a wedding, perhaps. And when we're really, really deeply frustrated or angry or sad. Emotional tears. There's a different type of tear called reflex tears that come out of our eyes because of wind or onions. Cool thing is that he found they have different substances in them. Reflex tears lack something that emotional tears carry out of the body. Emotional tears, not reflex tears, carry out of the body stress hormones and neurotoxins. Wow, that's cool research. Emotional tears are helping us release stress hormones and neurotoxins that develop when we feel something so intensely. It's helping us. It's an exocrine process. So just like urinating, defecating, sweating, it's helping to carry stuff out of our bodies that could otherwise hurt us. It's helpful. So this leads to another main reason why emotions are so important. What? I'm actually, I may have skipped this then. I think I'll just do a little review first. So, Judith Orloff also states that additional studies show that crying stimulates the production of endorphins, our body's natural painkiller, and the feel-good hormones. So it helps our bodies jumpstart a cascade of events that literally help us feel better. It's important to know, though, that this is not the case if there's too much shame around crying. If there's too much shame around crying, these benefits aren't there. So let's be mindful about not shaming our children for crying. Crying helps shed neurotoxins and stress hormones. It helps regulate breathing and heart rate. It helps stimulate the production of endorphins, the feel-good hormones. It facilitates a calm biological and emotional state. It boosts immune functioning. It helps improve memory. It improves digestion. In this way, this is what I was going to say. She said, what? What else does it help with? This is what else it helps with. In this way, we can see that emotional release is a way we can invest in our health. It sustains our health. Expressing our emotions in safe and appropriate ways sustains our health. This is different than acting out and hurting someone else and hurting our relationships. This is finding safe, healthy ways to express and release. William Fry showed that holding back tears leaves the body prone to weakened immunity, impaired memory, and poor digestion. Jane Brody reports that people with stress-related illnesses cry less than their healthy counterparts. People with stress-related illnesses cry less than their healthy counterparts. So back to the animals in the wild. The animals in the wild that aren't developing those stress-related conditions because they shake and tremble a lot. The people who shake and tremble a lot through crying or laughing develop less stress-related illnesses. Margaret Crepeau studied 100 men and women with stress-related disorders, 50 with ulcers and 50 with colitis. She compared them to 50 controls, 50 healthy people of similar age and circumstance. She found that those with 2 stress-related illnesses were more likely than their healthy counterparts to regard crying as a sign of weakness or loss of control. Out of these 100 men and women, those with 2 stress-related disorders were more likely than the healthy people to regard crying as a sign of weakness or loss of control. Those who were ill were less likely to cry in a variety of situations. In addition, a long-term study in Michigan looked at women who suppressed their anger and found that they had twice the risk of dying from stroke, heart attack, or cancer. Women who repressed their anger were twice as likely to die from conditions such as stroke, heart attack, or cancer. And conversely, John Sarno got really interested in chronic pain. And he found a way to help people cure chronic pain, migraines, chronic back pain, and eventually lots of other chronic conditions and chronic illnesses. How? Not through surgery, not through medication, not through physical therapy or acupuncture or chiropractic. How? Through helping people acknowledge their long repressed feelings and feel them and process them. I've now had the opportunity to work with a lot of people who have come to see me because they've been referred to me because they have chronic pain that the doctors don't know what to do with. And through a process of helping them turn towards their emotional lives, acknowledge their feelings, process long repressed rage, because they don't feel like they're good people if they're angry, so they stuff it, and it builds, and it starts attacking themselves and their bodies, and they start feeling a lot of pain, physical pain. The psyche, it's like the psyche says, it's dangerous to feel your feelings. I'm going to give you this pain to distract you from feeling this instead. And once we can help people say, you know what, psyche? It's not dangerous to feel my feelings. I can feel my feelings just fine. Thank you very much. Please don't make that decision for me. I can feel these feelings. They're not going to destroy me. No one's going to get mad at me. I'm going to express this anger in a safe, healthy way with my therapist or in a group support. It's not going to hurt me to feel these feelings. The pain goes away. The pain goes away within a week or 2. I had one woman who's given me the honor of sharing her story, one woman that I work with. She was a very high-functioning lawyer, very esteemed in her community, and she was a go-getter and a do-gooder. Interestingly, those are some of the characteristics that make people more prone to doing this, because they want to do good and be good and not feel anything that might not be good. They don't want to be angry at anybody, so they stuff it. So she had to quit her job and spent the first 10 years of her life raising her kids pretty much flat on her back because of chronic back pain. After reading Sarno's work, she wrote some letters to express her long repressed rage that she didn't think was something good to feel. And she recognized, well, maybe I'll give this a try. Chronic pain went away within 2 weeks. Gone. She had to quit her job. She kind of lost, and she grieves this loss, lost the kind of most wonderful years of her young kid's life, being a fully engaged parent because of this pain. And all she had to do was turn towards her feelings and feel them. It sounds so easy. And for some of us, it is the hardest thing to do. And we really do need support as adults. So of course our kids need that support too. Of course they do. Yeah. So, in this way, emotional release sustains our health. Yes. There's another story by Peter Levine, who's a trauma therapist, and in trauma therapy, these are therapists who help people feel the most overwhelming feelings that make people want to escape their bodies. When people experience trauma, sometimes they dissociate and they feel like they're just hovering above their body looking down at it. And he helps people kind of come back home to their dear bodies and feel their feelings in a more connected way. The most traumatic experiences that we can think of. And he was the first person in the late 70s to write a book on trauma, I was lucky enough to spend a whole weekend with him back in April. And he tells this story, just one of many stories like this. So there was this town that experienced a very intense earthquake, and there was a therapist who was supporting the parents because these parents came to him seeking support because their children weren't able to focus in school. Many of them couldn't even go to school anymore. They had bad tummy aches, and they couldn't sleep at night. And the therapist was having a hard time. It was just getting stuck. Week after week, there wasn't much healing happening. He was using all of the tools he had, so he sought the guidance and counsel of Peter Levine. Peter Levine encouraged him to ask the parents, what do you do when the children start to shake and tremble and have flashes